The fluorescent lights above me flickered like dying stars as I lay on the emergency room gurney, tubes snaking from my arms like transparent serpents. The heart attack had come without warning, a crushing weight that had dropped me to my knees in the middle of my morning garden routine. Mrs. Henderson from next door had found me face down in the tomato patch, my carefully tended plants scattered around me like fallen soldiers. "We've contacted your emergency contact," the nurse had said, her voice professionally gentle. "Your son should be here soon." That was 6 hours ago. The doctors came and went, speaking in hushed tones about blocked arteries and surgical options. The chaplain visited twice. I watched the sun set through the small window, painting the sterile walls in shades of amber that reminded me of better times. Times when Michael was small and would run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting that I could fix anything. "Mrs. Patterson?" A young doctor approached, clipboard in hand. "We tried calling your son again. The phone went straight to voicemail. Is there anyone else we should contact?" I shook my head, the movement sending waves of exhaustion through my chest. Michael was all I had left since Eleanor died 3 years ago. No siblings, no extended family, just my 42-year-old son who lived 20 minutes away, and his wife, Christina. "He's probably just busy," I whispered, though the words tasted like ash. The doctor nodded sympathetically, but I caught the look in his eyes. He'd seen this before. The abandoned elderly, left to face their mortality alone while their children lived their busy lives. It was Christina who finally appeared, not at the hospital, but on my phone screen the next morning. A nurse had helped me check my messages, and there it was. A Facebook post that made my blood run colder than the IV fluid dripping into my veins. "Looks like Karma finally caught up with someone. Maybe now she'll understand what it feels like to be ignored and abandoned. Some people get exactly what they deserve. Karma is real. Shock fake family. Suck good riddance." The post had 17 likes and 8 laughing emoji reactions. Below it, Christina had shared a photo from 2 years ago, Michael's birthday party at their house. I was in the background, slightly blurred, holding a gift I'd spent weeks choosing. The caption read, "Remember when we used to pretend to care?" My heart monitor began beeping faster, drawing the nurse's attention. But it wasn't another cardiac event. It was something far more dangerous. It was the moment I realized that my son's absence wasn't an oversight or a busy schedule. It was calculated, deliberate. And his wife was celebrating my near-death experience like it was a victory. The comments under her post painted a picture I'd been too blind or too hopeful to see. Finally. She was always so fake nice anyway. "Michael's better off without her drama. Old people are so needy. Good for you guys for setting boundaries." Boundaries. As if loving your child and wanting to be part of their life was somehow invasive. As if the woman who had worked 3 jobs to put Michael through college, who had sold her wedding ring to help with his down payment, who had babysat their dog for free countless times, was now the villain in their story. I scrolled through more posts, each one a dagger to whatever was left of my already damaged heart. Photos of family gatherings I hadn't been invited to, vacation pictures with captions about family time and choosing your people. A Mother's Day post about Christina's own mother, with the pointed hashtag #, real mothers #. The pattern became clear. Somewhere in the last 2 years, I had been systematically erased from my son's life, and Christina had been documenting the process like a social media trophy hunt. I remembered the signs I'd ignored. The shorter phone calls, the canceled dinners, the way Michael would look at his phone whenever I spoke. Christina's increasingly cool responses to my texts. The feeling that I was always imposing, always unwelcome, though I couldn't pinpoint when that shift had begun. But now I understood. It had begun when Christina decided I was disposable. The discharge papers came with a list of medications and follow-up appointments. The social worker, a kind woman named Janet, helped me arrange home care and transportation. She also gave me something else, a business card for a computer literacy class at the community center. "It's never too late to learn new skills," she said with a smile. "Staying connected is important for recovery." Connected. The word followed me home to my empty house, where the tomato plants I'd been tending lay trampled and forgotten. I spent the first week of my recovery doing exactly what Christina probably expected, sitting in my chair, watching game shows, feeling sorry for myself. But on day 8, something shifted. Maybe it was the way the morning light hit Eleanor's photograph on the mantel, or maybe it was the memory of her voice telling me, just before she died, "Don't let anyone make you invisible, Margaret. You're stronger than you know." I called Janet and asked about those computer classes. Mrs. Chen, the instructor, was patient with my fumbling fingers on the keyboard. She taught me about social media, about privacy settings, about the digital world my son and his wife lived in so naturally. "The internet is like any other tool," she explained. "It can build or destroy, depending on how you use it." I was a quick learner, motivated by something sharper than curiosity. I created accounts, learned the language of hashtags and handles, studied the ecosystem where Christina had felt safe to mock my pain. More importantly, I learned about digital forensics, about cached pages and screenshot tools, about the permanence of things people thought were temporary. Christina's social media presence was a masterclass in manipulation. She portrayed herself as the long-suffering daughter-in-law, martyred by an overbearing mother-in-law. She had crafted a narrative where my every attempt at connection was reframed as intrusion, every gift as obligation, every expression of love as emotional manipulation. But she had also been careless. The timeline of her posts revealed the calculated nature of my exclusion. Screenshots of text messages where she advised friends on handling difficult in-laws, photos from family events posted with timestamps that proved they had been planned around my absence. Most damaging of all, I found private group posts where she had shared intimate details of my life, my financial struggles after Eleanor's death, my health issues, my loneliness, all packaged as entertainment for her friends. One post, from just after Eleanor's funeral, showed a photo she'd taken of me crying at the graveside. The caption read, "Drama Queen Alert." Some people just can't handle life without making it everyone else's problem. That post had been liked by Michael. I printed everything, organized it chronologically, created a digital dossier that told the real story, not of a difficult mother-in-law, but of a systematic campaign of isolation and cruelty. Then I waited. Christina's biggest weakness was her ego. She couldn't resist an audience, couldn't help but perform her superiority. I knew she would eventually make a mistake big enough to bring everything crashing down. The opportunity came in the form of her friend Jessica's divorce. Christina, playing marriage counselor, created a public Facebook event called Divorce Party Liberation Celebration. The event description was brutal, detailing Jessica's ex-husband's failures and encouraging friends to share your own horror stories about toxic family members. Christina's contribution was a long post about me, published for all to see. "Since we're sharing, can I just say how amazing life has been since we finally cut out my toxic Emil?" This woman was like a vampire, constantly draining our energy and happiness. She literally faked health scares to get attention. Remember when she collapsed in her garden? The doctor said it was probably just dehydration, but she milked it for weeks. Michael feels like a new person without her constant guilt trips and manipulation. To anyone dealing with toxic family, cut the cord. Your mental health is worth more than fake family obligations. Toxic family, true boundaries. Living my best life. The post had 37 likes and dozens of comments, including several from people who knew me personally. former neighbors, friends from church. People who had witnessed firsthand the relationship between Michael and me over the years. I screenshot everything before Christina could think to delete it. Then I made my move. I didn't start with Christina. I started with Michael's boss. David Hartwell had been Michael's supervisor at the accounting firm for 8 years. He was also Eleanor's godson, though Michael had conveniently forgotten that connection. David had spoken beautifully at Eleanor's funeral about the woman who had helped raise him after his own mother died. I visited David at his office, bringing cookies I'd baked, the same recipe Eleanor had used for his birthday every year of his childhood. "Mrs. Patterson." He stood immediately, his face showing genuine pleasure mixed with surprise. "It's so good to see you. How have you been? Michael mentioned you'd been having some health issues. Did he?" I set the cookies on his desk and settled into the chair across from him. "That's interesting, David. I'd love to hear what else Michael has told you about me." The conversation that followed was illuminating. David knew nothing about my heart attack, nothing about my hospitalization. In fact, according to Michael, I had been doing great and keeping busy with my hobbies. I showed David the Facebook posts on my phone, watched his expression change from confusion to disbelief to anger. "This can't be right," he said, scrolling through Christina's timeline. "Michael talks about you all the time. He says you're doing well, staying independent." Read the dates, David. This post about my fake health scare was published the day I was discharged from the hospital, after my heart attack, the one Michael never came to see me for. David's face went pale. "Margaret, I had no idea. If I had known, you would have done what any decent person would do. But Michael made sure you didn't know. He made sure no one knew the truth." I pulled out the folder I'd prepared, printed copies of Christina's posts, screenshots of the timeline showing the systematic exclusion, evidence of the cruel comments about Eleanor's funeral. "I'm not asking you to fire him, David. I'm just asking you to know the truth. Eleanor loved you like a son. She would want you to know what kind of man Michael has become." David studied the documents with the careful attention of someone trained in finding discrepancies. When he looked up, his eyes were hard. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing. Just remember Eleanor when you look at him. Remember the woman who loved him, and decide for yourself if this is how her memory deserves to be honored." I left David's office and visited 3 more places: the church where Eleanor and I had been members for 25 years, the community center where Michael had played basketball as a teenager, and finally, Christina's workplace. Christina worked as a nurse at the same hospital where I'd been treated. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't ask to see Christina. Instead, I asked to speak with the administration about a patient advocacy concern. The meeting was with Linda Morrison, the hospital's ethics coordinator. I explained that I was a recent patient who had discovered that a member of their staff had been publicly mocking my medical condition on social media. Linda's face grew progressively more serious as I showed her Christina's posts, particularly the ones about my fake health scare and the photos of me in distress at Eleanor's funeral. "This is extremely concerning," Linda said, taking careful notes. "Healthcare workers are bound by strict social media policies, especially regarding patient dignity and confidentiality. Even if you're family, this kind of behavior reflects poorly on the hospital's values." She paused, studying Christina's post about my hospitalization. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to ask, did this staff member have access to any of your medical information during your treatment?" I thought back to that day, remembering a flash of recognition when one of the nurses had looked at my chart. "I believe she may have. She works in the cardiac unit, and I was there for 6 hours." Linda made another note. "We'll need to investigate that immediately. Patient privacy violations are serious matters, regardless of family relationships." By the time I got home that evening, the machinery I'd set in motion was already turning. Michael called at 7 p.m., his voice tight with confusion and anger. Mom? What the hell is going on? David called me into his office today asking about your health, and Christina got called into some kind of meeting at work. What did you do? I told the truth, Michael. That's all. The truth? What truth? You're being dramatic about my heart attack? The one you never came to see me for? The one Christina posted about on Facebook calling it fake? Silence. Then, how do you know about that post? I learned how to use the internet, honey. Amazing what you can discover when you pay attention. I could hear him breathing, could picture him running his hand through his hair the way he'd done since childhood when caught in a lie. Mom, you don't understand. Christina was she was upset. She didn't mean to celebrate my medical emergency. She didn't mean to call me a drama queen at your mother's funeral. She didn't mean to share my private information with strangers for entertainment. You're taking it out of context. Michael. My voice was quiet, but something in it made him stop talking. I have screenshots of everything. Every post, every comment, every cruel joke at my expense. I have timestamps showing you liked some of them. I have evidence of a 2-year campaign to erase me from your life, and your wife documented it all like a trophy collection. Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Smaller. What do you want? I want you to think about your mother. Your real mother. Eleanor. Remember the woman who loved you unconditionally, who sacrificed everything to give you a better life. Remember what she would think about the man you've become. I hung up. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of consequences. Christina was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation of privacy violations and social media conduct. David, who had done his own investigation into Michael's character, assigned him to less visible projects and made it clear that his behavior outside work was now a professional concern. The church, where both Michael and Christina had been volunteer coordinators for the youth group, received several calls from longtime members who had seen Christina's posts. Their volunteer positions were quietly discontinued. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source: Christina's own family. Her sister Maria called me on Thursday morning. Her voice was shaking with embarrassment and anger. Mrs. Patterson? This is Maria Delgado, Christina's sister. I saw some screenshots that have been going around. I need you to know that what my sister did, it doesn't represent our family values. Our mother is horrified. I later learned that someone, I suspected David, had shared Christina's posts with a wider circle, and they had eventually reached Christina's extended family. Her own mother, a devoutly religious woman, was appalled to discover her daughter's cruelty toward an elderly widow. The social media posts were deleted, but the damage was done. Screenshots lived forever, and the story of the daughter-in-law who mocked her mother-in-law's heart attack had taken on a life of its own in our small community. Michael appeared at my door on Saturday morning, looking haggard and defeated. I let him in and made coffee, the ritual as familiar as breathing despite everything that had happened. Christina lost her job, he said without preamble. The hospital found evidence that she accessed your medical records without authorization. She's facing potential legal charges. I poured his coffee the way he liked it. 2 sugars, no cream, a detail his wife had probably never bothered to learn. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? His voice carried a bitter edge. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Revenge? I set down my cup and looked at him. Really looked at him. When had my bright, loving boy become this stranger? When had his eyes grown so cold? No, Michael. What I wanted was for my son to visit me in the hospital. What I wanted was to not be mocked for nearly dying. What I wanted was to understand why the child I raised had decided I was disposable. His facade cracked slightly. It wasn't supposed to be like this. How is it supposed to be? Christina said, she said you were manipulative, that you were trying to control our lives, that we needed boundaries. And you believed her? She showed me things, articles about toxic parents. She said you fit the profile. I almost laughed. What profile exactly? The profile of a woman who worked 3 jobs to put you through school? Who helped you buy your first house? Who babysit your pets and brought casseroles when you were sick? She said that was guilt-tripping, that you were using those things to manipulate us. And what did you think? For the first time, he met my eyes directly. Thought. I thought it was easier to believe her than to deal with the conflict. There it was. The truth at last. It hadn't been about boundaries or toxicity or manipulation. It had been about taking the path of least resistance, about choosing his wife's comfort over his mother's heart. Your father left us when you were 8, I said quietly. Do you remember what I told you then? He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. You said that sometimes people choose the easy wrong over the hard right, and that the easy wrong always costs more in the end. I raised you to be better than that, Michael. Your mother raised you to be better than that. He broke then, really broke, tears streaming down his face as he bent forward in his chair. I miss her, Mom. I miss Mom so much. And Christina said, she said if I kept dwelling on the past, I'd never move forward. She said you were keeping me stuck in grief. The anger I'd carried for weeks suddenly evaporated, replaced by something deeper and more painful. This wasn't just about cruelty or neglect. This was about a woman who had systematically poisoned my son against his own memories, who had convinced him that loving his dead mother was somehow unhealthy. I moved to sit beside him on the couch, the way I had when he was small, and the world had hurt him. Grief isn't something you get stuck in, sweetheart. It's something you carry with you. It changes shape, but it never disappears completely. And that's okay. Your love for your mother is part of who you are. He leaned against me then, and for a moment he was 8 years old again, needing his mom to make sense of a world that seemed determined to break his heart. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered. You start by deciding who you want to be, not who Christina wants you to be, or who your friends expect you to be. Who Michael Patterson, Eleanor's son, wants to be. We sat in silence for a long time, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon sunlight. Finally, he straightened up and wiped his eyes. Christina's moving back to her mother's house. She wants a divorce. How do you feel about that? Relieved, he admitted. I've felt like I was suffocating for months, but I couldn't figure out why. Now I know. Over the following weeks, Michael and I began the slow process of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. But we started small. Sunday dinners, phone calls that didn't end with awkward silences, visits to Eleanor's grave where we could remember her together. Christina, meanwhile, faced the consequences of her actions. The privacy violation charges were dropped after she agreed to counseling and community service, but her nursing license was suspended for 6 months. She moved back in with her family, where her mother made sure she understood the depth of her mistakes. I never spoke to Christina directly again, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that she eventually found another job in a different city. She married someone else 2 years later, a man with no living parents. The story of what happened became something of a cautionary tale in our community. Not about revenge, exactly, but about the power of truth and the danger of believing we can treat people as disposable without consequences. Mrs. Chen, my computer instructor, used my story as an example in her digital literacy classes. The internet never forgets, she would tell her students. Always assume that what you post today will be read by the people you least want to see it. Michael kept Eleanor's photo on his mantle after the divorce was finalized. He started visiting more regularly, helping with my garden and learning to cook some of Eleanor's recipes. We talked about her often, not with the desperate clinging Christina had discouraged, but with the natural love of people keeping precious memories alive. One evening, as we worked together planting new tomatoes where the old ones had been trampled, Michael looked up from the soil on his hands. "Mom? Yes? I'm sorry, not just for the hospital or the posts or any of it. I'm sorry for forgetting who I was, who you raised me to be." I patted down the earth around a seedling, thinking of Eleanor and the way she had always believed people could grow beyond their mistakes. "Your mother used to say that the strongest trees are the ones that bend in the storm without breaking. You bent pretty far, honey, but you didn't break." He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. "She was pretty wise." "She was, and she would be proud of the man you're becoming." As the sun set behind us, painting the sky in the same amber shades I'd watched from my hospital window all those months ago, I realized that revenge had never been the point. Truth had been the point. Justice had been the point. But most importantly, love had been the point. The kind of love that doesn't give up, even when giving up would be easier. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear, refusing to be erased, and trusting that truth has a way of rising to the surface like oil on water. Sometimes the best revenge is just continuing to love, even when love seems foolish. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the people you refuse to give up on remember how to love you back. The tomatoes grew beautifully that summer, heavy and red and sweet. Michael helped me harvest them, and together we made Eleanor's famous pasta sauce, filling jars with the taste of forgiveness and the promise of second chances. Christina's posts were long deleted, but the garden remembered, the earth remembered. And love, it turned out, had the longest memory of all.